Student Safety in a Cyber World, a KCAU-9 Digital Town Hall with Tim Seaman.
And good evening. Thanks for joining us for tonight's Digital Town Hall, Student Safety in a Cyber World. Tonight is all about having a conversation and a round-robin discussion about an issue that not only is affecting school kids in many different age groups, but the very young as well as adults. Tonight, a discussion about staying connected through social media and the internet, but yet staying cyber safe. It's a challenge that we all face, and to get started tonight, we want to zero in on cyberbullying. That's where we'll start. According to the website Enough is Enough, nearly half of all young people, 47% in fact, have received intimidating, threatening, or nasty messages online. And perhaps shockingly, almost as many of those kids admit that they have sent hurtful messages themselves, only later to understand that they could have been perceived as bullies themselves. That is why we have gathered professionals who on a daily basis work closely with this issue. In the studio tonight with us are four people, each bringing a different perspective to our discussion. And I just want to say thanks to all of them, first off, for being here with us tonight. And they will be, as I say, bringing us a different perspective to all the different discussions that we are having here tonight. And I want to get started and introduce you to all of these fine folks that have joined us tonight. And we'll start with Sergeant Ryan Bertrand. He's with the Sioux City Police Department. Ryan's a veteran of the department. He handles the Crimes Against People division and is actively involved with cybercrime and cyber types of threats. So Ryan will have a perspective from that community tonight. Stephanie Larson is next. Stephanie, thanks for being here. She is a freshman counselor at Sioux City West High School. So she has firsthand knowledge of the things that are happening with children, not necessarily because they're school kids, but because they are kids. And she'll bring that to the discussion tonight as well. Next is Carol Voloshin. I'll say up front, a friend of mine, their family is, and that's how I managed to drag her in here tonight. But she's going to bring that parent perspective to us. Carol and her husband are parents to two teenagers, and so they have been involved firsthand with things that happen on the internet and cyber activity. And finally is Dr. Raul Sanchez, who is with us tonight from Renewing the Mind Clinic. He is a psychologist, and we've talked with him several times for different cyber safe segments, and I know you have firsthand experience with some of the people that come to you for help and the things that you've been able to advise them on and help them with that issue. So that's where we get started tonight. We also want to let you know that joining us from the Sioux City Schools Career Academy are about 30 high school students, all members of the particular student councils here inside Sioux City. We especially look forward to hearing what they have to say tonight and their reactions to what we have to say here in the studio. I also want to take time to thank the student council advisor, Michelle Pick, who helped us set things up tonight with those students, and we will be hearing from them throughout the evening tonight. So with that, we'll get started, and I want to encourage, again, everybody in the room to just jump in. This is a round-robin discussion, and we'll have your comments as we go along. I want to take a look at a graphic to get started here quickly if we can. These are some numbers that you may or may not be aware of, but we're going to talk about cyber bullying and what kids seem to perceive during that. Nearly half of young people, as we mentioned, say that they've been bullied at some point. Meanwhile, there's another set of numbers that's also pretty interesting here, and that is that 60% of teens admit to being bullied online have told an adult, compared to 40% just a year ago. So kids are aware of the problem and they're beginning to talk about it more openly. Stephanie, let's start there. You're in the schoolroom every day with these freshman youngsters that are beginning their careers in the high school. Do you sense that kids today have a better understanding of what happens and how harmful it can be?
Yeah, I do. I think with the prevalence of social media and how it's just blown up in the last few years, that we see a lot more students have more access to it and utilize it more often, and maybe don't always know how to use it correctly. And so they may think that what they're saying could be perceived as something positive when maybe it doesn't come off that way, or vice versa. They are saying something negative and it's perceived as even more harmful. I get a lot of students in my office that will tell me, like, so-and-so said this, or this was on Snapchat or Facebook, or, and then we kind of have to recover from there and take it from there. So yeah, I would say that there's a lot more.
Ron, well, maybe you also would have a good indication of that. In your practice over the years, is the trend a positive trend right now or a negative trend, would you say?
I would say it's a negative trend. A lot more kids use it to fortify their position. The best thing I usually try to do is help them reframe what the words are. So basically you call this ghost fighting. So Tim, if you and I are friends and I know you had a party or something and you didn't invite me, so I'm going to send you a message and I'm already going to interpret you are hurting me because you didn't invite me. So when you send me back a message, I'm going to read into that. So my job is to say, do you know for sure that's how Tim meant that? And then we kind of work through that perception. We call that ghost fighting. Like you're fighting a ghost, you're fighting your own fear. And so if we can help people pull that piece out, we can empower people, even though if you were trying to hurt me, I can still let that go.
To add to what Raul said, there's so much of communication and has to do with nonverbal communication, and you certainly lose a big piece of that when you're communicating just via typed words or a text or something like that. So people have difficulty communicating their true intent, like maybe they meant it sarcastically or jokingly, but the words as received or either read by the person receiving the message, they might take it a completely different way, and that misalignment gets everybody stirred up. And the other piece, I guess, that really strikes me most about technology is how easy it is. Mm-hmm. And 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was a piece of paper passed around a room. And it would be very easy to keep that just between a couple people. But nowadays, with the ease of technology and how easy that makes communication, it's easy to send that out to a wide audience and have a major impact.
And I would assume that the mental process when I see that message is instantaneous. I form my opinion almost instantaneously. True?
Yes.
False?
Yeah.
I think so.
Even before. So like if I know there's a beef between us, I'm already anticipating you're going to come at me hard. And even if it's a neutral statement, I'm going to read it badly. And then so I'm going to send you back twice as hard of a message. And then it just blows up.
Carol, you started to say
Yeah, and I was going to say, I mean, as a parent, the advice I give is just to stop. You know, don't buy into it, don't feed into it, don't continue to play the game. And that's not easy to do either. You don't want to be that person. Sometimes you want to be the one that had the last word in. So.
we've got such an instantaneous society right now that the impulse is to fire right back. But you really, I guess it would be advice to say take a breath and step back. And I would think your mental process, if you do that 5 minutes later, is not going to be as harsh as it was on this snap of a dime.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other thing that adds to it as well is on the flip side of it being very quick, there's also a delay in that if I say something bad about you, I don't see your reaction. You may react to it instantly. Maybe your feelings are hurt, maybe it causes you to cry or be upset or angry. I may not get that. And if I had received that reaction right away, we'd complete a type of a feedback loop, and I would know to, hey, this is what I want to do, this is what I don't want to do, and I could change my behavior accordingly. But if there's a delay in your response, I may fire something else off and fire another thing off and fire another thing off, and then it just really becomes just overwhelming.
And another piece of that instantaneous piece, I think, is that when it used to be that when somebody got left out of a party on a Friday night or something, they didn't find out until Monday at school. And by then, everybody was kind of chilled out about it, where now it's on Instagram the second everybody's together and you can see it, and kids just get hurt quicker that way. It's not something where you can kind of let the effect wear off, or, you know, maybe you had a great time Friday night too, so it doesn't really matter. But instead, you're seeing your friends all get together on Snapchat or Instagram, and then you're like, well, why did they leave me out? What did I do? Why did I deserve this?
How intent is that with kids at home, Carol?
Yeah, and that is true. We encourage our kids not to post things on social media if they were with, you know, a group of friends and some group of friends weren't with them. For that purpose, that's something we want them to avoid. I would say as they were younger, it was harder for them to stop that, and I think as they've gotten older, it's easier to not have to share every moment or every second on social media on what they're doing. So
we've talked here about that instantaneous response. I'm curious, what type of effect is there on a residual? You know, you send the message that's hurtful to me, but all of your friends are also seeing it. What's the residual effect of that waterfall almost of other people that maybe not even been in the conversation, but all of a sudden now they're part of the negative spin?
Yeah, there's a depersonalization that happens. Any of the studies where people talk intimately about hand-to-hand combat, to use that example, the people that are the most traumatized by combat are those that are where it's done up close and personal, like the bad breath distance, they say. When you get in the person's face and you can hear them and feel them and smell them, the most traumatic for the combatants involved. But then you spread that out and take someone who is merely pushing a button somewhere. They don't have the same trauma and they don't have the same effect of it. So what happens is the people become disassociated by what's actually going on. The person on the receiving end of it feels it very deeply and it's very personal to them. But all these other people that are just adding to the fire, it becomes a type of entertainment. And it's very easy for them to get the reaction from the victim or the person that's being bullied. And then it's easy for them to take it as a game, as a type of entertainment, versus then seeing for what it really is.
We are encouraging folks at home to send us their messages as well. If you've got a question for our panel, you can send us a Facebook message, and we've already received a couple of questions tonight. Let's take a look at the first question that we've got, and we'll have the panel look at it. There's the information again. You can go to KCAU-9 News, our Facebook page. You can go to the KCAU Sioux City YouTube account as well. And one of those first questions, this one is, it says Jackson, and the question says, the internet has been around for a long time. At what point did the technology start to produce these negative influences? Anybody remember when you, maybe Raul, you would have I'm sure Ryan, you might as well.
Yeah, the first one was like the AOL accounts where people could do group chats. So before it was just me and you, and we could kind of figure that out, but then you could have 9 conversations at the same time. And so I'm having a paintball conversation over here, and I'm having this party conversation over here, and then you just really quickly just start snapping judgments, and then people start getting hurt, and then everybody in the feed sees it. And then they tend to do these backdoor tweets and backdoor messages and says, hey, did you see what Tim said to you? Like, aren't you mad? And then that fuels your anxiety and your anger. Like, oh, you felt that? Like, he came at me? And then that fuels all this hate.
And that was maybe the 80s?
That probably, yeah, well, 2099.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's been around. I'm old enough that I had the brick cell phone to start, so I couldn't. It was hard to text on the brick cell phone. We want to take time to check in with our students that are at the Career Academy tonight as well, and have them give us their first impressions on how things are going here tonight. We've just got the ball rolling. We want to hear what you think. Is there a topic that you want us to make sure we talk about? But our Rebecca Pryor is over at the Career Academy tonight, and she's meeting with those high school student council members from the 3 city high schools. And Rebecca, if Rebecca's standing by, we want to pitch over to her and let her check in with those students. Rebecca? Check in with our students that are at the Career Academy.
Yes, Tim, I didn't have a brick cell phone, but I did have a flip phone. You have your expert, a panelist, and I have mine. These are the guys that started out with social media. They started out with iPhones. They've been using this since they were very young, and it's impacted them in ways that you probably won't imagine at home. They have been shocked, a lot of them surprised to know that 1/2 of people in their generation have been affected by cyberbullying. I want to kind of go to our first panelist here. We have Estella. Estella, what can you tell me about that statistic and what it kind of means to you?
The first thing I can say is I'm not surprised at all. Most of my friends, most people I know have been cyberbullied, myself being included. It's just almost normal now.
And that's sad, and we shouldn't have to deal with that. Our next panelist we have is Dominique. Dominique, how do you feel about 1/2? What does that mean to you?
To be honest, it does not surprise me, considering the fact that, like, I am a user of social media, and I've seen it all, I guess you could say. So, like Estella said, myself included too, I've experienced it.
And I think that we're seeing a trend here. We're going to go over to our last one, Patrick. Patrick, what does that mean to you?
I'm not surprised either. Being in this generation, it's so much easier for people to attack you anonymously. And being myself, I haven't been personally cyberbullied, but I have read into things wrong, leading to breakup of some friendships, but strengthening others.
You've read into a situation where someone messaged you and you kind of read it differently because it was online?
Yes.
In what way did that affect your relationship?
At first, it made me quite sad and angry at the person for a couple of weeks, and since it was during the summer, it was not like I didn't see them, so that it wasn't a face-to-face talk. But then after a while, I figured out they didn't mean it. It was an accidental thing. People met up at a certain time. They didn't think of others, and it was just all pure accident.
And you guys talked a lot about that. You talked about nonverbal communication. When you're not face to face with someone, it's hard to know what they really mean when it's over, text message or if it's over the internet. And that's tough to come to a resolution if you can't see that person in person. Now, I want to talk more about cyberbullying. You guys have some stories that you'd like to share. Have you been personally impacted, Dominic?
So back in 8th grade, around the time when there was the National School Walkout, a couple students disagreed with what Estella and I had organized walkout purposes. So they went as far as to creating an anonymous Instagram account and saying some really hurtful things. So that's my story.
And how did that impact you?
It did not make me feel good whatsoever. It definitely, just going on Instagram and seeing a picture of me with a very hurtful caption really hurt.
And I've only known you for a few moments, but you come off to me very confident, very bubbly. How have you kind of overcome that?
Just stay positive no matter what. Just, I did reach out to the school counselor. It did get reported. It never got resolved, I guess. But I just stay positive constantly.
Good. And you should be confident because you're a great kid.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go over here to Estella. Estella, you've been personally impacted as well. Would you like to share?
Yeah, I absolutely have. I've had social media for 5-6 years, but when I started out, I was really concerned with what I put out there and the feedback I would get from people. Some of it was negative, some of it was positive, but I remember the negative comments would really impact me, and I would just be sad with the whole day. But over time, I've just not cared what people have been saying. I have just been confident in what I post, and I know what I'm posting isn't bad, so if they have a problem with it, that's kind of on them.
Good for you. Thanks so much. All right, Tim, we're going to send it back to you. These kids are not only smart, but they're also very brave. We appreciate you guys all sharing your stories. We're going to send it back to you guys to see what you guys have to say.
All right, Rebecca, thanks, and we'll talk with the folks at the Career Academy again. I want to take time just to talk for just a second here. We're talking with students that are in student council. This isn't just a student issue. It's not a school issue. It's businesses, it's professional life, it's everything. But Stephanie, I'm curious, talk just briefly for us. Iowa has some of the best cyberbullying laws in the country. Our school district has it as a priority to take steps to prevent that and to educate. Just talk very briefly about in the classroom the tools that you're able to help kids with.
Sure. So we do, especially in our freshman classes, we have a program called MVP. It's Mentors in Violence Prevention, and where we have upperclassmen students coming into our freshman homerooms to teach them a little bit more about different kinds of violence. So whether it be cyberbullying, in-person bullying, dating violence, anything that you can really think of. And so we kind of start there, giving them kind of a peer that they can go to if they need somebody to talk to. Our teachers are also very involved in that communication with the students. So our teachers help lead those classes, those lessons, and then we have at West High at least, our acronym is Welcoming, Engaged, Safe, and Trustworthy. And so we really try to embody that, especially when it comes to anything that a student has to say about any type of bullying, cyberbullying included. And then as a whole district, we have a way to anonymously report any type of violence towards a student or a staff member in any case. And so we're able to really take as many steps as we can to help prevent something like that from happening, or at least react to it very quickly to help all of those that are involved.
Forward thinking, being proactive, certainly part of that plan. Thanks for that. We have another question. This one just came in while we were at the Career Academy. I want to check this. How could someone use social media to combat bullying? That's an interesting point. Anybody want to jump on that? How would you turn the table?
So like the MVP stuff, I was part of the original team right after Columbine hit, and the number one thing with MVP is the bystander effect. So if somebody comes up and starts pushing me, get in my face, my buddy jumps in and says, hey, leave Raul alone. And so then we just turn away, put our backs to the bully and walk away. In social media, it's very difficult to see that somebody's being bullied, because even if there's like a hard comment against you, I just look at it as one thing, and I'm not going to pick it up. But like that might be the 19th comment that's made towards you from that one person, so I don't know to defend you because it was just one-time thing. And so that bystander effect and the anonymous portion of that like, that kind of hurt, but I don't think that's bullying. So then people pull back. And the concept would be to jump in even when you think it's bullying, but you're not sure. Just like, hey, leave them alone.
So sometimes you have to rely on the kids to speak up and talk about it. I think it's very important to continually to tell your children to be open with you and not afraid to tell you anything, and even more important, not to overreact when they do.
And I would imagine as a parent, it's difficult if you don't have a dialogue with your child to start with. It's going to be pretty hard to start a dialogue about something that was probably pretty nasty that's been said about you. So
Yes.
would you encourage that type of dialogue all along?
Yes, yes, and sometimes I can see behaviors when my kids are withdrawn or quiet, and I think, oh, I wonder what they're seeing on social media, or what's going on in the group chat, or what are they seeing that I don't know, and I think that's a regular thing. It affects their mood, and just have to try to stay open communication and continue to encourage them to open up.
It is a difficult thing. Ryan, I know you and I have talked before, and you made the reference to me was it's difficult, but you can do it then, or you can do it weeks or months later when it's turned into something much worse, and all of a sudden they're in your office and they're having to talk about it.
So I enjoy everything that they're saying. It really strikes home. The mentoring is huge. There's a really interesting study by a guy named Dr. Phil Zimbardo. He did the Stanford prison inmate study where he set up some students as prisoners and other students became guards. And he let this play out. And then what he was surprised to find out was just the levels of cruelty that people would be willing to put on other people. And ultimately, someone called him to a census. He ended up marrying this woman. That became his wife. That's part of the funny story of it. But there's this idea that we would try to develop resiliency in our kids, that they could handle some bullying or maybe some affronts. But really on the most simple way, there are those kids that are out there that put something out and they're looking for some likes, or they're looking for some support, or they want someone to validate who they are or what they're doing or what they're wearing. And in the simplest matter, other people can just use social media and say, hey, I like that. I like you. You're valuable. And however that gets said. But they can use that simply in that manner, just to be encouraging as a start.
Yeah, it's really, really important to understand too that out of the bullies, so the people who bully, 60% of them have been already victimized themselves. So they're really wounded. So they get hurt, they stick this stuff in a backpack and they carry it. And then they see everybody else having fun, everybody else posting pictures, and they just feel so hurt that nobody came to bat for them. So then they start to do it, right? And then they get negative attention. So I'd rather be, you have me in my face and you coming at me than being ignored. Being ignored is the worst thing ever. So I'd rather have the negative attention. And so that's the one thing we have to make sure we recognize is if we get a lot of bystanders jumping in and just saying, hey, leave them alone, hey, are you okay? Even if I say no, looking back later, if I'm wounded, I can look back and say, well, at least Tim tried to help me. And so that's where we have to send that signal, because a lot of the people who are victimized, 60%, become the bullies.
Stephanie, perhaps you could mention, or you might have an opinion here, is that awareness, are students more likely today than even a year ago to step in or to try to put a roadblock in that path of something that might be a cyber threat?
I think so. I think they're more aware that it's happening.
Sure.
Whether they've, as we heard from our students at the Career Academy, whether they've experienced it themselves as being bullied, they recognize that it's happening to other kids around them too. And so they see more of those, they're more aware of what's happening. And so some of those little jabs they may recognize as, oh, wait, they did that last week to this same person, like this isn't okay. I want to step up, I want to do something. It's hard to tell for certain because we don't see the things our kids are posting on social media all of the time. And so it's hard to know for sure that that's what's happening, but I think we are doing a really good job in teaching them how to do those things and implementing things like MVP and other classroom lessons so that they're aware that like, oh, this is happening. I have the ability to step in and help instead of just kind of standing and watching it play out.
Or being afraid to jump into that.
Yep.
Social media, cyber threats, they can come from anywhere. I want to show you a graphic that from a recent piece of research that talked about where threats more likely will come from, what different social media services or apps are out there, and which ones are the ones that are seeming to draw a lot of attention. Kids report bullying on those different platforms, of course. Instagram was at the top of the list, Facebook and Snapchat. Those are all applications I think that most parents are aware of. Are there new applications out there, and maybe Ryan, you'd be the best one to ask this, that are now being used that parents need to be made aware of?
Yes, and new every day, and they have a different popularity week by week, it seems. So the people want to go where the other people are, and they're going to want to go where the fun people are and where people are hearing what they're saying. So obviously Instagram is very popular, Facebook's very popular, Snapchat's very popular. There are other different types of messaging services. A simple Google search for an interested parent, you can find what's hot or what's new, or surprise, sit down with your child, take a look at their phone and see what these are, and if you see something you don't recognize, hey, what is that? And what's that do? And have that discussion. So they change all the time and for different reasons. One may offer some type of encryption, one is easy to share pictures or music, and it's the flavor. And people find a way under whatever system to communicate.
Carol, I'll put you on the spot. Did you look at your kids' phones, and what would you tell a parent that's maybe afraid to do that? And go to what you were going to say before I interrupted.
And I would say, yeah, it's tough. It's really tough because they're using different lingo every week, and I'm like, okay, what's the word of the day? Well, what's the T? Or, that's probably old by now. You kids at the Academy are probably chuckling at me, but it's tough to stay on top of it. And yes, take their phones and don't tell them, I'm going to take your phone and look at it every week, or, it needs to be random and that type of thing. So they're not, because they can delete a lot of information. And that's another hard thing about a lot of the apps is it goes away instantly. And so being able to track things is really hard. They can delete the app off their phone and you don't even know what's happening. And there are a lot of anonymous texting apps out there that WhatsApp and a lot of others that you can just be they can guard from parents or hide from parents, and it's tough.
I'm curious, how did, even though that was maybe difficult conversation to sit down and say, I want to see what's on your phone, did that help maybe lead to a better overall discussion you had with your kids on a daily basis?
I would agree. Yes, I think so. If there's been a concern and we look at the phone and then go into better discussion, I think sometimes my kids were relieved that happened. So.
We've had a couple of questions come in from folks. We want to remind you again, we want to hear from you. If you have a question, you have a concern, pass it along and we'll share it with our group. There's two ways you can get to us tonight: the KCAU-9 News Facebook page. You can also message us on the KCAU-TV Sioux City YouTube account. We'd be glad to check your messages as we sort through those tonight. I just was told we got a Facebook question, so let's go ahead and jump to that and see what that person might be asking about. What are the healthy boundaries to set up for your child to use social media?
Wow, anybody? So that's a great question, and it's a big question. One of the things, obviously, right off the bat would be time. What time of the access are they allowed? So, like, let's say if it was a school night, and by 9 p.m., no more access to the internet. And for example, there's technologies available. Like in my home, I have a router that I can control with an app on my phone. And at a certain time of the night, I can just internet off, and I can literally turn off any access to the internet. If I have a data plan that I'm paying for as the parent, I certainly can have most of the major services have different ways to control or limit bandwidth or access. So time is going to be one of them. The actual amount of data is another way that you can set some boundaries. Like, what's reasonable? How long do you need to look at YouTube videos? How long do you need to spend messaging people back and forth before you do other things? The whole concept being that there's a finite amount of time, and if I'm spending 4 hours a day doing this, that's times I'm not reading a book, practicing my band instrument, studying my school, etc. So I would say time would be the easiest. And bandwidth would be the second other one, and I'll leave the rest for the.
Go ahead.
for the
The other three have an idea there?
I would say it depends on each family situation is different. Like I have a coworker that has a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. So I was quizzing her today on what that looked like in their house. And my kids didn't start out with social media when they were that age. And so it's different for our family than it would be a family with young children today. And definitely, she told me about an app they use that she can control from her phone and profile each different device in the house as to what they can use when the access is shut off at a certain time of night. And I would agree with him. Those are the key things right there.
I think it goes back to checking the phone every once in a while too. Just have your kid pull up Facebook every so often, or you see them on it, be like, just ask them, hey, let me see what you're doing. Or I know a lot of parents have social media accounts, so set up a Facebook, a Twitter, an Instagram, and even if your kid won't let them follow you, know what name they're under and check what they're posting every so often or things like that, just to know what is happening out on the internet, so they can kind of see maybe some trends of things that are happening, or
Sure.
Just get an idea of what's going on.
I would maybe have a question for the students over in the classroom is how many...
Hang on don't forget your question. We're going to go to them in just a second, so I want to wait so that they hear your question last. Dr. Sanchez, I wanted to ask you, you're the health professional. When would you say, what's the appropriate, again, it's a family decision, but from a medical standpoint, what's an appropriate time for a kid to be able to text? And
It really depends on what app, what platform, and then how old. So for example, like video games specifically, there is actually a disorder called Internet Gaming Disorder, IGD, and that really starts at 3 hours per day. So if you're playing 21 hours of video games a week, you're starting to change your brain. So neurologists can do blind studies, just take you by this age, and all they do, no history on you at all. They're completely blind, and they know if you've played more than 21 hours of video games per week just by looking at your brain. So that's video gaming. Wow. So social media, though, if you use it right before bedtime, so Netflix, Instagram, it doesn't matter, and then you go to bed, your brain is still fully firing for another 2 hours to 90 minutes. And so you really want to let go of all social media at least an hour before bedtime, so your brain can start to wind down so you can actually get good sleep. Because most kids wake up completely exhausted and they had a full night of sleep. Well, because their brain's super active. So it really kind of depends. Young kids, like no social media, no screens until 2. But that stuff is so kind of minuscule compared to everything else and all the drama that everybody wants to fight for, that if you're that parent who says my kid's not having any social media until age 2, like you're way out there, right? So then you got to just decide, okay, well maybe 30 minutes a night, let's start there. The number one issue, everybody hit it, is monitoring. Monitoring is just like, we've got 3 boys that have already graduated, and I just randomly come up and say, hey, phone sweep, and they just toss me the phone. I don't let them go to the room and mess around and delete stuff, and they're pretty confident that I'm going to sweep it. And I don't look at every single conversation. I'm not looking for specifics. I'm just kind of glancing through, making sure there's nothing illegal, first of all, and then just making sure my kid's being an outstanding student, and just like, hey, you got to be this bigger person thing. And so then I just hand it back to them pretty quickly. Otherwise, like, hey, you want to talk about that? And what's really cool is at first you get nothing. And then the more you do that, you bring conversation. The more you do that, next thing you know, a kid's coming to you and saying, hey, I got to talk to you about something. And once you open up that window, it just starts to push really big, and your kids can come to you. But it starts really up front, and people are like, man, I tried that thing, and we got in a fight. Yeah, well, that's the first time you tried it. You've got to get comfortable with it.
We're going to put our panel on alert here. We're going to go back over to the Career Academy now. Rebecca has found 3 students that have questions for us here in the studio, and I'm going to put the students on alert. When we finish, Sergeant Bertrand has a question for you to consider at the Career Academy, and when we come back to you before the end of the hour, we'll have an answer from the students on that question. So, Rebecca, go ahead and get us started. What's the first question from the Career Academy?
Yeah, Tim, we actually have some questions for you now. You guys mentioned how it's hard for parents to kind of keep up with their kids in social media. Part of that being because there's so many new platforms out there, you can hardly keep up. WhatsApp, I've never even heard of that. We heard about a Kick app tonight. There's lots of different apps that you need to be aware of. And Ellie has a question, Ellie from East High, about that, about how social media is transforming in this day and age.
Hi, so do you expect an increase of negative environment as technology develops? And if so, how do we keep up with that?
No. One more time.
All right, we're going to come back to the studio and we'll get an answer for that.
Keep up. What's that?
There you go. Go ahead. Who wants to try to grab that?
I would like to hear the question one more time.
Can you give us the question one more time over there from the Career Academy?
Okay, the question is, would you like to repeat it for them?
Okay. Do you expect an increase of this negative environment as technology develops, and if so, how do we keep up with it?
We were getting drinks for our panel here, so we were kind of distracted. That's my fault. There you go.
So I would say yes, it's going to increase, and our number one tool are you all, because we really pick up a lot of skills from you. I go to my kids, I'm like, hey, if I wanted to watch this or look at this, how do I do it? And my kids would just say, hand me the phone, and they just show it to me. I'm like, wait, whoa, slow down, time out. Do that again for me, let me see it. And so we really have to take a lot of skills from you all, because you're learning super fast. We're old school, like I grew up with an Atari. I mean, I can't keep up, right? So we need your help, and so it's a great question, and we need you.
All right, Rebecca, let's go back. What's your next student-related question?
Yep, we have another question coming, so no drinks this time, guys. This one is going to be from Zoe from East High. Zoe, what do you want to ask the panel?
When do you think a joke on social media turns into something negative that can really hurt someone's feeling? Like, how do you decipher the tone of a text or comment?
That's a good question.
I think we talked about that earlier. The nonverbal communication is really tough to interpret, and as opposed to in person, you can read body language and things like that. So depending on what the situation is, I would sometimes, I know this is a long stretch, but you could pick up the phone and call somebody. So I'm finding myself doing that a little more lately. I like to text a lot. But that is an option, is to just talk about it if you can't wait till you see them the next time.
It's a lost art, so to speak, almost, picking up the phone. Stephanie?
Another thing that we do in the schools sometimes is if we have a student or a couple of students that bring to us an issue that happened, a lot of times we'll do our best to do some mediation in a way, and bring both parties in, allow them to kind of talk about what was happening, what led to this, and then try to kind of hash it out. Obviously, we make sure that both parties are comfortable doing this before we bring them in the same room, and we are working towards having some student-led mediation, hopefully in the next couple of years as well. So that way, it won't always just be adult-led. It's oftentimes a little bit easier to talk to your peers than it is to an adult in the room. And so we're hoping that that will be something that we'll be able to continue to work towards.
And sometimes you respect the opinions of those peers,
Exactly.
unfortunately, more than you do parents. We want to go back to the Career Academy one more time, and Rebecca has another student with another question over there, and I want to remind the students again, when we're done with this answer, we will bring you a question.
We're like a
Rebecca?
phone call. What's that? We just do texting. However, from how do we decipher a joke to something more serious, Camden from East High does have a question that he would like to ask.
How should I, as a teenager, respond to someone who's been talking about suicide on their social media because of cyberbullying?
That is a very important question, maybe the most important question we've heard tonight. Go ahead.
The first thing is, so the first responder kind of concept, right? Psychological first aid. So the person who sees that or gets that information, that's the first person on the scene. It's that person's responsibility to find another close friend in their tight circle and say, hey, let's go, we got to go to the school counselor. And then you go to the school counselor and say, hey, we found this message, and we know Tim's been acting like this, so we don't know what to do. Typically, then that's when mediation comes in, and there's a group of people come in surrounding you, helping you understand that we're out there for you, we're here for you. You can't let that slide. You have to be the first responder.
Yeah, an adult is really important in that situation. That shouldn't be something that you as a student feel you have to take on and handle on your own. There are school counselors, trained professionals, even if you're not comfortable talking to your school counselor yet. I know it's early in the year. A lot of kids don't know their counselor yet. Maybe there's a teacher, maybe there's a principal or a parent that a friend's parent you're really close to that you can go and tell somebody. It's important, very important to get an adult involved right away.
Yeah, and the fact that they've communicated that is a clue.
Right.
In a very common sense way, that is a clue. The absolutely worst thing I think is to add fuel to it, tease them, continuing perpetuate that is terrible, and taking a step back from there is to do nothing is also terrible. And then to listen to what the person's really saying. I wanted to go back to the last question, add a little bit to the girls. How do we know about telling a joke?
Yeah.
Very simply, when there's communication, there needs to be feedback loop. I say something to you, how are you feeling, Tim? You say, I'm feeling good, Ryan, and we have completed a loop. If I am merely just putting things out one direction, how do I ever know what the other person is responding with? So if you're going to send a joke via text, hey, I sent you a joke, ha ha, maybe do a smiley face letting them know that it's a joke and not just a comment. This was a joke, or a joke is going to follow, here's my joke. Did you like the joke? And if the person then responds or doesn't, you might have a clue. So.
And to our question about suicide as well, I think it's an awful difficult first step to take,
Right.
but it's one that you have to be willing to take.
Right, and I want to speak to that piece too, because the person who's the first responder, they see it and say, man, I should do something. Their number one ghost fear, the ghost fight piece is, man, he's going to be so mad at me if I tell. And you've got to stop that ghosting. It's in your head. He's asking for help. It's called the cry for help. And so you got to jump in really quickly and go get an adult. And again, it could be his parent, your parent, the counselor, a coach that you really trust, and say, hey, I got to be the first responder here. What do I do? And then let the adult take it from there.
Okay, we told the students that we'd have a question for them. Ryan's going to take care of that. Ryan, it's yours.
Yeah, so the question for the students is, with the technology that y'all have, I'm assuming most of you guys there have cell phones of some type. What do you all feel would be an appropriate boundary from your parents as far as limiting the use of your device? And would you miss your cell phone if you lost it for a week? So would that be a good motivation, keeping or losing your cell phone as a form of discipline?
All right, you guys think about it at the Career Academy. We'll come back to you here before the end of the hour here at 8:30 when we wrap up, and we'll get a couple, 2 or 3 responses from that. So think on that. I want to take another question that we've had called in. We can pump this up. I'm not sure if this is from YouTube or Facebook, but we do have another question. We'll have the panel take a peek at that and see if they can handle this one. Sometimes my son complains about getting picked on. How can I tell if this is a serious threat or if I need to encourage him to toughen up a little bit? Somebody kind of mentioned this roughly, maybe Dr. Sanchez did earlier, but that seems to be like a no-brainer, but yet it seems like maybe that is something that's legitimate.
Yeah, and that really depends on the parent. So kind of like the disciplinarian parent tends to say, hey, you need to toughen up, you need to develop tough skin. The more nurturing side of the parent says, oh no, my kid's being crushed, what do we do? And the answer is both. You got to have both ends of there. So you grab your kid, you hug them, you tell them, hey, it's going to be okay, thank you for sharing, thank you for opening this door. So you nurture first, or you build that compassion. And then you say, hey, how does this hurt you? Explain it to me. And then you can give some examples like, hey, if this is my good friend Jeff, and he's saying this to me, I wouldn't take it wrong. But if it's a guy I really didn't know very much, and he says it, I can see how that hurts. So again, you give them a gauge of how to interpret that piece of information.
Ryan, I want to turn to you. We've talked a lot about the effects of any type of online threatening messages. And we're mostly talking about kids, but I'm curious about the legal aspect. What is out there right now? A lot of people think, well, it's just a harmless message and I'll tell them I'm sorry and it'll be over with. It's not a joking matter anymore. It's serious.
Yeah, so like when you have a person that is engaging in this behavior, it's harassment. It's a form of harassment, and that is a crime. So when this contact or the communication is unwanted, unwelcome, annoying, and it persists, that is a form of harassment. Now, because harassment is a simple misdemeanor and it's considered a very low crime, there might be people on both sides, like a parent that might say, toughen up, you know, that's just words, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, you need to toughen up. And so erroneously, sometimes we only give them that message. And then on the flip side, sometimes we don't give them any kind of resiliency advice. We just we give them the victim role, and sometimes I think that can exacerbate the problem. And then we put in their head that they're always a victim and there's no way out, and they're surrounded by evil on all sides, and there's absolutely nothing they can do, and they're powerless to stand up to any of this. So I think both ends of the spectrum, by themselves can be bad. So the firm boundaries, the self-worth, saying no, if it persists and there's contact you don't like, it's okay to say no. I really like this concept that no is a complete sentence. Mm-hmm. And if you don't like something, say no. That immediately clarifies my position. If you ask me would I like an ice cream cone, and I say No, I do not like an ice cream cone. Thank you. You don't need to continue to pressure me to give me an ice cream cone. And any further attempts to get past my no, past my boundary, I should take with a red flag. I should be on guard against a person that doesn't accept my boundary. And in this case, it's no, and your contact is unwanted, unwelcome. I don't like when you talk to me like that. Then there's no doubt. If I don't communicate that, someone might feel that they're doing it in joke and they're funny. They may think they're funny. They really maybe don't mean to hurt me, but they are. And other people can pile onto that too unwittingly, and it feels terrible to me. And sometimes what I need to do for myself is just to say, this is unacceptable. No, I don't like this. And then if it persists, then I know what space they're in. Then I know that it's intentional, and then that changes my whole approach to that person.
And what about just from the legal standpoint, though, from harassment and it's intentional? There are laws in Iowa that, I mean, you mentioned it's illegal. There are laws that are significant.
Absolutely. So from the smallest level, it goes all the way up to misdemeanor stuff, and then we see things on the criminal side that might involve someone being using images, maybe even naked images,
sure,
that they're using to send out maliciously. And those can get into very serious crimes. Those can be, like, we're talking federal crimes where you might have a 5 or 10 or 15-year sentence if the right conditions are met. So these can be very, very serious crimes that can get people in big trouble.
We've got another question that we want to get to. This was called in just a short, or texted in just a short time ago. And it says, Dr. Sanchez, do you believe social media is now a big part of shaping your self-worth? I don't know if that means yours, but I mean people
correct.
in general.
The answer is yes, and specifically for people who don't have an identity. So like if I'm not in band, I'm not in football, I don't have really a good identity, the kids that are most at risk are they just go to school and come right home, and they don't have anybody to stand in, so they don't have a bystander friend, and if they don't have a bystander friend, they're most at risk. So they're the ones who are usually putting the most stuff out a lot, trying to create an image and hoping that they get positive feedback back. And so sometimes that's called the looking glass self. I don't know who I am, but when you look at me and tell me who I am, I take that. And so it's really good if it's positive, and it stinks if it's negative. In those kind of situations, I like to just tell people understand, like, you've got to create so if I'm the person who's looking for self-worth there, I always say you have to, it's like playing tennis. If I serve you a ball, I'm waiting for your return. And if you just keep serving all the time and nobody's responding, move on. That person doesn't want anything to do with you. And likewise, if I just get repetitive comments toward me and I say stop, that stuff's not coming at me, or it's coming at me at a fast pace and I haven't responded, that can be bullying because I'm just taking what they're saying all the time. So a lot of times before you make a decision to respond, ask yourself a question like, is this a back and forth like a tennis match, or am I just getting drilled here? If I'm getting drilled, I'm just going to opt out.
We'll take a look at some statistics again here. Another graphic I want to bring up, and we're talking about the hurt that is happening on the internet, and there are several different types of things that specifically draw that hurt. 61% in a recent poll said that the hurt was targeted the person's appearance, 25% about their academics, 17% their race, 15% their sexuality, 15% the financial status, religion, and others. It's not any one thing that gets targeted in these situations. That's, I think, a given. Stephanie, I want to come back to you again here. How do you think your student body overall is stepping in and helping with that list of options there, I guess, the negatives?
Well, I think we have a really diverse student body, especially at West High. We have a very diverse group of students, and so I think we have a lot of kids that are really aware of the differences make us who we are and make us unique, and it doesn't make us bad. It doesn't make us better than anybody, and it doesn't make us worse than anybody. It just makes us who we are. That I think kids are becoming more and more aware of that. We have a few different programs throughout the Sioux City School District. GSA is one. I know sexuality was mentioned on there. And our GSA programs have gotten even bigger in the last few years. So that's Gay Straight Alliance for anyone who is unaware. And it's students on any edge of sexuality coming together to be an ally for anybody who may be perceived as different. And so that's been a really cool thing that we've been able to see grow in our school district to help in that specific area.
And I would say, just in general, the teachers in the Sioux City School District are there to intervene, listen, help, do anything they can to help curb that and stop it, be an ear to listen to those kids. If they can't tell mom, they're afraid to tell their parent because they're afraid that they won't believe them or push it aside. And I think that's a big part of it too, is the teachers in the buildings are a big asset.
I want to go back to the Career Academy if we can. I know they're standing by here as we start to wind down towards the bottom of the hour. Sergeant Bertrand from Sioux City Police posed a question in our last segment at the Career Academy. Rebecca, have you got some answers for us? Okay, they're not quite ready. We'll get back to them though. We only got about 10 minutes till we're going to wrap up here. I'm going to open it up. I've asked a lot of questions. What's at the top of the mind for you folks that we haven't talked about that you think we should get in before we wrap up here at 8:30?
I would say cyberbullying discussions need to start early in the home. It's never too early. Maybe that's a broad statement. I guess you can decide with your kids. I just remember discussing more sensitive topics with my kids when they were kindergartners through, 5th graders. It's like, just kind of a scary thing as a parent. When do we address those situations? So communicating early, because, all those kids have access to screens at a young age, and it's important to just start talking early and be open at any time.
It sets the groundwork for what will be future discussions.
From my perspective and the things I've seen in work, and I'm kind of referring to things that are bad, I think, we talk about, I want my child to be a doctor or this career or that career. I think it's also really excellent that we would foster them to be a hero or to have good character or to stand up for other people. Those are virtues that make our whole society better. And there's plenty of smart doctors, and there'll be plenty of people to do all these jobs. But how nice is it when we have a person of good character that can hold another person up and hold themselves in a good place? That's what I would ask parents to take a look at is, hey, foster these career aspirations, of course. We need the academics,
right.
But those character pieces, and the challenge is to the students that are listening here as well, is to take my challenge, make it your mind to have a character be a part of your life.
And I would add to that, be thoughtful before you post anything online, even if it's not technically cyberbullying, but just to go along with your character. Be thoughtful about who's going to see this in 5 years, or is this something that really reflects me? And be a good digital student or citizen out there, and always think before you post.
I just think having these conversations is so important, and the fact that we're able to have them as professionals, and that we have students that are willing to have this conversation with us, and parents sending messages with questions, that's a great step in the right direction. And I think that even though there is a lot of negative stuff happening and that there's a big negative impact, we're also really aware of that and working towards this positive social change. And I think that that's such a great step.
I have a really cool resilience concept, which is I just teach kids what's awesome about that. So when I was a kid, I was in special education until 5th grade. I had reading disability. They didn't call it dyslexia back then, but I was tested in college, and that's what it is. But I didn't understand how to flip that upside down. So people called me, a retard boy and this kind of stuff, and that's back when they'd come and knock on the door and say, hey, I'm here to pick up Raul for class. I'd get up and walk out, and you'd hear people call me names and making fun of me. So I just start fighting. So if they picked on me for being stupid or being a poor reader, that really wounded me. So I just came at them. So it wasn't until later, and I started understanding what are the strengths of dyslexics and what's awesome about being dyslexic. And so I have super good creativity, and people are just like, how do you know that? I come at problems from such an opposite angle that I can think of things that other people can't think of. And so I help people, if somebody says, oh, you're short, you can't play volleyball. I'm like, okay, so maybe you can't. What's awesome about that? And for the first couple of times, they just look at you like, did you not hear me? I'm like, yeah, I heard you. What's awesome about that? And we start focusing, and what happens is if they just pause for a little bit and just dig, and they start to go, oh, I'm really fast. I go, okay, so what can you do if you're really fast? And so that what's awesome about that concept, and for you students, if you could just really help each other figure that part out, like what's awesome about wherever you're at. So if you're picking on me for something, it usually is going to wound me if I believe it's true. So like if you call me skinny, I'm like, that doesn't hurt me, right? If you call me stupid, I'm like, okay, now we're going to fight. Do you see what I'm saying? So I have to figure me out so that you can't wound me. And that's the resiliency side.
Something to think about for the students, and we're going to go back to the students. I have been told that they're ready with their answers to the question that was posed by Sergeant Bertrand a short time ago. Rebecca?
Yeah, I like what you guys kind of said about character counts. When you talked back to people judging their self-worth based on their social media, I can see how that instant gratification of waiting for likes to roll in would impact someone's self-esteem. However, every kid in this room, I want you guys to know that you're so much more than a like, that character counts, and that you guys are all really great kids. Moving on to that question we had about our parents, though. So here we are with Rosario. What do you think is too much when your parents are intervening in your own social media?
Honestly, I don't think that there is like a huge boundary set. Like, they're your parents, they should probably know what you're doing, and you shouldn't be doing something bad if like you're too afraid to have them see it. And I know from the start, when I first got my phone and when I first started on social media, I kind of jumped into things and didn't really think before I did stuff, so I got my phone taken away a lot. And that over time just made me realize, you know, like, I'm going to get my phone taken away. Should I do this or should I not do it? And now I've kind of grown into more of like understanding how social media works and how that's going to affect me and others. So now I know because my parents were there to set those boundaries at first.
Can we all give claps for Rosario? That was an amazing answer we had. That's something that I would almost call the grandma rule. If you don't want your grandma to see it on social media, you shouldn't be posting it. We're going to go over here to Destiny. Destiny, same question. What is too much involvement when it comes to your parents and their social media?
Well, I feel like taking a phone for a week would be a bit too much because technology is a tool. And I feel like when parents should do more of is teach us how to use this tool for good. I have learned a lot of things using my phone. I've used it for homework, learn how to play the piano even. I've used it as a tool, and we can learn how to take advantage of it. It would be better for parents to have more one-on-one conversations with their kids and give them advice on how to do the right thing on social media. When we do the right thing, we'll have nothing to worry about, so do the right thing.
So you feel like having an open dialogue is probably more effective for you personally than taking your phone?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Destiny. Thank you guys all for participating. We're going to send it back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Rebecca. Wow. There are some good kids out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great answers.
We want to pass along a couple of numbers before we wrap up tonight. If you have a concern, you have a question, you need help, we'll leave this up for a couple of minutes here, but there are numbers here that you can take advantage of. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, the number there is 800-273, and that is TALK, or TALK would translate into 8255. There's the crisis text line. That's a free call, 24/7 support for those in crisis, provided by a trained crisis counselor. The number is there. And the teen line as well helps adolescents address their problems through a confidential peer hotline and community outreach program that's open from 6 until 10 Pacific time every night. But those numbers are there for your help. We'll leave it up another minute or so in case you're trying to jot down a number or at one of those different helplines. But while that is up, I just want to say thanks, and it's a great conversation that we hope to be able to continue in the months to come, and appreciate all of your time, and thanks to all of you for the work that you do, not only in this vein, but on the daily basis and other things you do here in our community to keep things on the right track. We appreciate all of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
All right. And we thank all of you for being with us tonight as well at home, whether you were on our Facebook page, our KCAU-9 page. We really appreciate it. We hope that you'll join us again, as we're going to try to continue to do these types of events in the coming months. So make sure you look for it, and we want you to participate as well. We had great participation tonight from several folks as well as those students, and so we'll do it all again down the road. For tonight, for our panel here, the students downtown, have a great night. I'm Tim Seaman here at KCAU 9 News.
Student Safety in a Cyber World, a KCAU-9 Digital Town Hall with Tim Seaman.